A few days ago, I put up a video about the violence surrounding American embassies in the Middle East as a result of a movie that somebody made. And today I want to talk about another form of religious depravity, a form that we are much more familiar with in everyday life here in the U.S., and that is not as violent, thankfully, but is just as insidious and just as destructive in its own way. And I'm going to show this to you by example. I'm going to read a Facebook status update from a friend of mine, a Christian friend. I won't tell you her name. I'll just say that it's a Christian and that she is a she. And someone I've known for a while, never been really good friends with, but have been acquainted with since school. And she says, quote, "At home eating leftovers. Thankful I have leftovers to eat. Smiley. There are so many people who don't know where their next meal is coming from, much less have food left over after they're done eating. So thankful I live in a prosperous nation where food is plentiful and that I have plenty for my family every day. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving me all that I need." Now, here's why this statement and this attitude is morally reprehensible. First of all, she thanks God for things that God did not give her. She or her husband or whoever is the breadwinner in their family, whoever is the actual human being that is providing the food that she gives her family, they are who she should be thanking, not God. God did absolutely nothing for her or anybody else because God ain't there. God doesn't exist. But beyond that, because I know she does think that God exists, let's look at the internal problems with this worldview, because she believes that God is there and that God is taking an active role in her life and the life of her family. God is providing these good things for her. God is responsible for her being born into a prosperous nation. God is responsible for her having enough food to feed her family. So much, in fact, that they have leftovers, which she acknowledges is not the case for a lot of people. A lot of people around the world don't have leftovers, ever. A lot of people around the world barely have enough food to keep them alive, and some people don't even have that much. And she displays an awareness of this. This is not news to her. She knows that there are people in the world who don't have enough food. And she also thinks that she knows that there is a God in heaven who is responsible for her having enough food. And yet, it never seems to cross her mind that if God could give her and her family more food than they need, surely He could provide just as much for all the other people around the world who don't have enough, who don't have their needs met. And He doesn't do it. And she doesn't seem to have a problem with that. That's what I find so depraved and so repugnant about this attitude. And it's the cluelessness of it. It's that she is completely unaware of how horrible this is, to be so grateful and so thankful to God for giving you more than you need, and to never have any question in your mind that maybe God should be doing this to other people who need it. You just sort of don't even question it. Well, God gave me more than I need. I guess me and my family must deserve it. So I guess the people who don't get it, they must be doing something wrong, or they must be fulfilling some part of God's plan. Think of the cruelty of that, of the callousness of that. Only a religious person could be capable of that level of callousness, to be aware of human suffering, as my friend here obviously is, to be aware of human suffering in the world, that her God, if He existed, and He was as she believes Him to be, could end in a moment, in a heartbeat, and doesn't. And she feels no sadness over this. She feels no guilt. She feels no anger at her God for allowing this. Nothing. She feels no sense of, well, gee, maybe God isn't as good as we've always thought He was. Maybe the best answer to this contradiction is that there is no God, and that we're responsible for what we have, and that we were born into this prosperous nation by luck, by chance, by a quirk of genetics. And if we had been born into one of the poorer nations, into one of the more impoverished, one of the nations that have been blighted by drought or famine, that we wouldn't have leftovers, and that we should be thankful. We should certainly be thankful for what we have. We should certainly be glad that we, among the billions of people who live on the planet, were born in a place that allows us to provide for ourselves and allows others to be provided for. But we could very easily have been born in one of the other places. And maybe we shouldn't just dismiss the suffering of others as part of God's plan, or ignore it, or express an awareness of it. But as my friend here does, she expresses an awareness of the human suffering in the world. But it's more just like as a concept. Well, yeah, oh yeah, I know that those people over there in Africa are starving. Oh yeah, isn't that terrible? But you don't really feel anything. You're not really aware of it. You don't really sense that there's anything really all that bad going on over there. And why should you? God takes care of you. Look, am I going to say that this sort of thing is as bad as members of radical Islamic groups murdering people for breaking their internal rules? I'm not going to say that. But it is the Christian version of that. Christianity has been civilized now to the point where Christian radicals capable of committing the sort of crimes that we have seen of late from Muslim radicals are few and far between. They're statistically anomalous. I mean, every once in a while you will hear of a crazy Christian person shooting up a religious school or blowing up an abortion clinic or committing some other horrible crime. But for the most part, those things generally don't happen. Christianity has a pretty good lid on its crazies. But what is still widespread, what is still so pervasive among American Christians, I'll speak about because they're who I'm surrounded by and they're who I know, is the attitude. The attitude seen in that status update by my friend, that clueless callousness toward the suffering of others, that indifference, that cold indifference to the suffering of others, while praising their omnipotent God for showering them with blessings, and having no problem at all with the fact that there are people suffering in the world, and the God they believe in could do something about it anytime he wanted and doesn't. Chooses to allow them to suffer for some reason, we know not what, and really it's none of our business even for asking. It's that attitude that I find absolutely abhorrent, absolutely repugnant. And yes, it doesn't result in violence, it doesn't result in terrorism, but if you look at it just purely from a moral perspective, if you can compartmentalize a little and divorce yourself from the physical consequences that follow and just look at it purely as a philosophical idea, that callousness, that clueless religious depravity that is exhibited in my friend's status update, where she thanks God for providing all the food her family could ever need while acknowledging the other people in the world who don't have anything. It is just as reprehensible as the moral justifications used for religious terrorists. It doesn't result in the same horrible real-life consequences, but reduced down to its barest philosophy. I find it absolutely as ugly and as horrible as the justifications that Muslim terrorists, for instance, use to justify their acts of violence. And it should be resisted and challenged and questioned and pushed against just as much.